To the east lay the remains of a broken kingdom, once filled with laughter and joy, now sat silently in the rubble. But with my audience gone, and no one left to return to, I set off to the north, where legends spoke of a fantastical place, where time had no voice, and fate held no counsel. That was where I was needed. I believed once that I was put on this earth to be nothing but a joke, a jester for amusement. Something to mock, something to point and laugh at. But her words told me otherwise. And as my steps echoed through the soft crunch of leaves, I was determined to find what my purpose was. I certainly wasn't the kind of jester to sing. My voice would crack and cut through the air with no sense of tone at all. Often I would use it as a bit of comedy. I couldn't juggle or play any instruments. I was raised to be a stonemason. I could carve and mold stone like magic, but could never quite figure out how to play a tune. So I marched on through the night, using the stars as my guide, and my resolve as my strength. As I stared into the magnificent dark, I found beauty in the illuminated sky. Upon entering the field, I simply laid in the grass. With my backpack filled with knickknacks and belongings beside me, I let the moon speak to me. I listened to the breeze as the cold wrapped around my skin. There was such beauty here. There was a song that even I could hear. For a moment, I considered staying. But this was not where I was needed. So when dawn's light cracked through the night, I too rose to the occasion. It wasn't far now. Just a little further, and I would find my purpose. The field was just as gorgeous during the day. I could only imagine the tales that this soil had witnessed. Perhaps a great battle, or maybe an honorable duel, a meeting between old friends, or a parting of star-crossed lovers. Whatever it was, I wished that I could spend longer here. But it was just over the hill, secluded and yet oh so welcoming, waiting for the right person to find it. I had believed it as nothing but a myth before I was a jester. But the stories told of this place was something to behold. It was these stories that got me into the castle. It was these stories that allowed me to entertain the most beautiful woman that my eyes had ever beheld. As I began to climb the hill, the memories of my time in the castle had begun to follow behind me, paving the road of my past and clearing the mist that was my future. I was no good at tricks, nor was I with jokes, but stories, that was why they kept me. I had no idea where these stories were coming from, only that they would appear next to my bed, ready and waiting. And once my home had fallen, and I was left alone, one more story appeared next to my bed. My own. As if my story had come to a close. But written within the papyrus was an unfinished story and instructions. I was called to this place. I was unsure if by whom, but I would have my answer soon. At the top of the hill you could see everything, the marvel that was the world. Above me birds flew past, singing a melody of their own, swapping stories of what they had seen from their home in the sky. And there it sat, the place where I would find my purpose, where an old jester would discover the quill behind his stories. An old wood building that looked to have been there for quite possibly decades, maybe even a century. Trees dotted the land around it, each of them filled with crisp apples waiting to be picked. The flowers of the garden behind it danced in the air, waiting to be tended to. An old stone path led to the grand oak doors, the path circling around a fountain that once flowed with water. This place was past its prime. The beauty it once held now lay dormant under the vines. I felt this tug deep within my chest, beyond my heart, where my soul sat anxiously. It was like seeing a family member that I had lost. being reunited with an animal companion after years of searching for each other. I began to wonder, was this place looking for me as much as I was looking for it? Even as I approached the gates at the bottom of the hill, it no longer felt like exploration. It felt like visiting home. When I pulled on the cold iron, it creaked out a greeting. Time had not been kind to this place. But it too held a resolve, refusing to collapse like everything else. The stone still felt smooth beneath my boots, and the fountain was beautifully crafted. My father would have spent hours admiring the craftsmanship of it. Even with the moss growing on it, it still held some vision of grandeur. But as I walked past it, I felt one of my own stones beginning to lift. The life I had lived as a stonemason, leaving out of the gate. For that wasn't who I was. The steps leading up to the doors were cracked, but stable. Each step I took felt like I was walking into something familiar. The cool breeze against my skin reminding me of the night before. The sound of my boots reminding me of the woods before. And now these doors stood as a reminder of when I first left to find this place. And a look into the future. What was in it, I was uncertain. With a deep breath, I prepared myself. My purpose was in here, and I was ready to see it. I reached my hands for the door handle, prepared to feel the usual click of a lock. But the doors opened with no problem, as if they had unlocked just for me. As I gazed inside, my eyes widened with shock and disbelief at the treasure waiting for me. A place where time held no voice and fate held no counsel. A trove of shelved wonders, a sky of weather-bound stars, a sea of stories, an archive of legends. I stepped inside to find that it had been untouched by the disarray outside. The floor clean and polished, the carpets fresh and soft, the windows clear and gleaming. It had seemed impossible. How could the inside be so maintained while outside was near shambles? My steps echoed as I examined the winding shelves, dozens and dozens and hundreds and thousands of stories, all bound and waiting, each of them without an author. The inside seemed immune to the laws of reality as well, seeming to stretch on without worry. So long as there were stories to be shelved, there would always be room. I found myself running down these passages with excitement and awe, recognizing all of the stories as the very ones that waited for me by my bed. I was starstruck by the sight of books hovering in the air, unbound by the weight of gravity like us mortals were. I never found myself lost. I never found myself worried. Piano played through the air, but with no musician to command it. Soon enough, I found myself in a study. A fireplace already lit with crackling flame. A leather chair sat beside it with piles and piles of books around the seat, as if someone had been catching up on some reading. In the middle of the circular room sat a lone bookstand. When I approached, it flipped open. Curious, I began to read, my eyes scanning through the written literature. I would never forget those words, each letter acting as a new stone in the path in front of me. As long as stories existed, it read, this archive has. For once it was filled with those willing to lose themselves in paper and ink. These halls are left with only an old fool. I find my time running out, and my story coming to a close. But I know that it will pick well. So I leave this for you, O honored one. Do you take up the mantle of archivist, surveyor of all these halls hold? I found it hard to believe that I had been sought out by this place of wonder. I felt myself hardly worthy enough to even consider taking up such a task. I was just a jester. Then it hit me like a brick to the skull. It was stories that got me in front of the throne. It was stories that brought joy to those in the streets. It was stories that brought me away from a legacy I felt wasn't mine. It was stories that had brought me here. I was a jester, yes. But storytelling was what made me who I was. and the honor to survey these great tales was what I was meant to have. The answer was simple. I would survey these halls, organize each and every story, and in doing so, I would restore this place to its former glory, inside and out. And here we are today, an old jester looking for his audience. I am N2, archivist to this great archive, and I will be your humble narrator, delivering you with tales of grandeur, tales of magic, tales of humanity, tales of resolve. After all, what is a jester without an audience? And what is a story without someone to tell it?